The air in your small mud brick house is cool and still, holding the lingering quiet of the deepest hours of the night. You lie on your woven reed mat, your body heavy and relaxed, sensing the gradual shift in the world outside before the first light touches the horizon. In the darkness, you hear the distant, rhythmic chirping of insects near the riverbanks, a sound so constant it has become the background pulse of your existence. You breathe in slowly, noting the faint, familiar scents that define your home. The sun-dried mud of the walls, the earthy residue of the flax, and the ghostly trace of yesterday's wood smoke that clings to the rafters. You are a baker, a craftsman whose hands have learned the weight of grain and the temperament of fire. You do not wake to a clamor, but to the internal clock of your own habits. You push back the heavy linen blanket, feeling the rough texture of the fabric against your skin. You sit up slowly, your feet meeting the packed earth floor, which remains cool beneath your soles. The room is a sanctuary of simplicity. In the corner, a few clay storage jars hold your modest supplies, while a wooden stool sits beside the doorway, draped with your daily attire. You stand, your muscles stretching, and reach for your linen kilt. The fabric is light, cool, and soft from years of washing in the Nile. You wrap it around your waist, pulling the cloth taut and securing it with a precise, practiced movement. You are preparing not just for labor, but for a ritual that has sustained your people for generations. You step toward the doorway, pausing for a moment to look through the small ventilation opening near the ceiling. The sky is a deep, bruised violet, the stars still sharp and unblinking, unaware of the heat that will soon rise to bake the valley. You step out into the village street. It is a narrow, winding passage of compacted dirt and dust, flanked by houses built of the same sun-baked brick that protects your own family. Everything is hushed. You walk with a steady, deliberate gait, your bare feet finding the familiar dips and stones of the path. You are heading toward the bakery, a structure that sits slightly apart from the living quarters, defined by its massive, thick walls and the scent of ash that emanates from it, even in the coldest hours. As you approach the heavy wooden gate, you feel the weight of your responsibility. You are the one who ensures the cycle continues, that the emmer wheat, the gift of the Nile, is transformed into the sustenance that fuels the village and honors the gods. You reach out, your fingers brushing the worn wood of the gate. The hinges are simple but sturdy, and as you pull, the gate groans softly, a sound that is the true beginning of your day. Inside the courtyard, the darkness is absolute, yet your memory maps every inch of the space. You know where the large mixing vats sit, where the heavy sandstone querns wait for the grain, and where the firewood is neatly stacked against the northern wall. The smell here is richer, more complex, a blend of dry husks, residual fermentation from the previous day, and the deep, permanent smell of stone that has been heated and cooled 1,000 times. You walk to the small hearth where you keep your lamp. You kneel, finding the clay oil lamp on its small shelf. It is filled with castor oil and holds a simple flax wick. You take up your wooden fire drill, placing the point into the small depression of the hearth block. With steady, rhythmic pressure, you begin to spin the drill. You feel the friction, the slight vibration in your wrists, and then the thin wisp of smoke rises. You quickly catch the glowing ember on a piece of dry tinder, transfer it to the wick, and blow gently. A golden flame blooms. It is small, but it is enough. As the light spreads, the shadows in the courtyard retreat, revealing the familiar contours of your workspace. The mud brick walls, darkened by years of soot, seem to lean in comfortingly. You place the lamp on a low wall, creating a pool of warmth that anchors the center of the room. You stand for a moment, simply observing, letting your eyes adjust to the soft play of light and shadow. The bakery is waiting for you, and in this quiet moment before the apprentices arrive, you feel a profound sense of connection to the rhythm of the land and the duty of your hands. The stars are beginning to fade, and the day, with all its heat and labor, is ready to be born. The light from your lamp casts long, dancing shadows as you move toward the grain storage area. You approach the large, rounded clay silos, the vessels that safeguard the lifeblood of your village. You lift the heavy clay lid, setting it aside with a dull thud, and the scent of the emmer wheat greets you, an aroma that is dusty, sweet and faintly nutty. You reach into the silo with a woven reed scoop, the grain cascading over your fingers like dry golden sand. You transfer the emmer wheat into a large, sturdy basket. The movement is fluid, a repetition you have performed since you were a boy watching your father. You carry the basket to the grinding station, where the heavy sandstone saddle querns are embedded into the floor. These stones are the center of your morning toil. You kneel before the lower stationary stone, its surface worn smooth and slightly concave from years of rhythmic friction. You begin to pour the wheat onto the stone. You do not hurry. You take the upper hand stone, the molaire, and place it atop the grain. You lean forward, the weight of your upper body pressing through your shoulders, your arms, and into your palms. You push the stone away from you, then draw it back. Scrape, grind, slide. The sound is a low, guttural rasp, a song of transformation. As you grind, the wheat begins to break, the outer husk separating from the starchy endosperm. You are not seeking a fine, powdery flour like that of the nobility in the distant cities, but a coarse, wholesome meal that retains the texture and strength of the earth. You focus on the sensation of the stone beneath your skin, the way the grains pop and fracture under the pressure. The dust begins to rise, a fine, pale mist that catches the lamplight, swirling around your face and coating your forearms in a thin layer of white. You find a rhythm in the repetition. It is a meditative state, one where your mind can wander while your body remains perfectly occupied. You think of the fields, the way the Nile flooded the valley months ago, leaving behind the rich, dark silt that fed these very stalks. You think of the farmers who harvested this crop, the threshing floors where they beat the grain under the sun, and the winnowing process that carried away the chaff on the breeze. Every grain you grind today carries the memory of that labor. An apprentice enters the courtyard, his footsteps soft on the packed earth. He bows his head slightly, a silent greeting that you acknowledge with a nod. He does not speak. He knows the work begins in silence. He moves to a secondary grinding station and begins his own labor, the rasp of his stone joining yours, creating a dual rhythm that fills the room. You watch him for a moment. He is young, his movements still slightly unpolished, but he is learning the balance of pressure and pace. You stop to wipe your brow with the back of your hand, leaving a streak of flour across your skin. The air is becoming thick with the smell of crushed grain. You take a handful of the meal and let it sift through your fingers, feeling for the right consistency. It is perfect. You scoop the fresh meal into a clean basket, making space for more grain. The morning is advancing, the sky outside shifting from violet to a soft, pale gray. And the bakery is no longer a silent tomb, but a place of awakening activity. The foundation for the bread is laid, one stone scrape at a time. With the baskets now filled with a sufficient mound of coarse, freshly ground meal, you stand and stretch your back, the joints of your spine easing into a more upright posture. You walk to the central mixing vat, a large, rounded vessel fashioned from fired clay, its interior smoothed by generations of use. Beside it, another apprentice has already brought a jar of water drawn from the Nile, the surface still cool and clear. You begin the process of creation. You pour the meal into the vat, the sound a soft, rustling hiss as the coarse flour settles into the bottom. Next, you reach into a small, specialized storage jar that contains the most precious ingredient in your bakery, the starter. It is a portion of dough saved from the previous day's baking, a living, bubbling culture of wild yeast that carries the unique character of your bakery's environment. It is thick, pungent, and slightly sour, and as you drop it into the vat, you are essentially waking up the spirit of the bread. You begin to pour the water in, not all at once, but in a slow, steady stream. You take a wooden paddle and begin to stir, your movements wide and circular. At first, the mixture is clumpy and resistant, the flour stubbornly dry in places. You add more water, watching as the dust turns to a thick, heavy paste. You continue to work the paddle, feeling the resistance increase as the gluten begins to develop, binding the grain fragments into a cohesive mass. The smell is transformative. As the water meets the meal in the starter, the sour, earthy aroma of the fermenting dough begins to fill the space, sharper and more alive than the smell of the dry flour. This is the moment where labor shifts into something more patient. You know that fermentation is not something you can force. It is a partnership with invisible forces. You step back from the vat, wiping your paddle clean. The dough must now rest, protected from the morning breeze by a clean linen cloth draped over the top. While the dough begins its slow, invisible work of rising, you take a moment to look around the workshop. Other apprentices are busy at their own stations. One is carefully sweeping the floor, gathering the scattered husks and stray flour into a pile to be repurposed for animal feed. Another is sorting through the remaining grain, ensuring no stones or desert grit have made it through the grinding process. There is a quiet, industrious peace here. The sun has finally cleared the horizon, and thin, golden shafts of light are beginning to pierce the smoky atmosphere of the bakery, turning the drifting dust motes into tiny, suspended jewels. You move to the edge of the courtyard to check on your supply of tamarisk and acacia wood. These are hard, slow-burning fuels, ideal for the high, sustained heat required for your ovens. You inspect the bundles, ensuring they are perfectly dry. Even a small amount of moisture in the wood could cause too much smoke or an uneven fire, and today, everything must be perfect. You have orders for the temple, including delicate, decorative loaves that require a precise temperature, as well as the standard ration loaves for the workers, which require a hotter, more aggressive bake. You return to the mixing vat and lift the edge of the linen cloth. The dough has already begun to change. It looks slightly swollen, the surface smoothed by the early gases of fermentation. You press a finger gently into the center, watching it spring back with a subtle, elastic tension. It is ready for the next stage, but for now it needs the quiet heat of the morning to grow. You feel a sense of satisfaction. The cycle has started, the grain is awake, and the dough is beginning to breathe. You have done your part for this hour, and you allow yourself a moment of stillness, watching the light climb higher up the soot-darkened walls, signaling that it is time to move toward the hearth. Now that the dough is tucked away, breathing under its linen shroud, you turn your attention to the heart of the bakery, the mud brick ovens. These structures are your most trusted companions, domed chambers of clay that have been baked hard by the fires of seasons past. You walk toward them, the air growing warmer as you near the mouths of the ovens. They are dark, cavernous and cooling, waiting to be brought back to life. You begin by clearing the remnants of yesterday's labor. Using a long-handled clay rake, you pull the last of the gray ash from the hearths, spreading it across the floor near the entrance to be collected later. This ritual is essential. A clean oven draws air better and allows for a more consistent heat. You work methodically, your movements practiced and efficient. The dust dances in the air as you pull the rake, but you have long since learned to keep your breath steady, avoiding the sting of ash in your lungs. Once the hearths are cleared, you begin the process of coaxing the fire. You reach for the bundles of dried reeds and tamarisk branches you prepared earlier. You start with the reeds, light, airy, and quick to catch. You lay a small bed of them in the back of the oven, their dry stalks ready to ignite at the first touch of a flame. You reach into your lamp, drawing out a burning wick, and carefully transfer it to the base of the reed pile. The reaction is almost immediate. A soft, crackling hiss fills the oven as the flames lick upward, consuming the reeds with a bright, eager intensity. You watch the fire grow, the orange glow reflecting in your eyes and casting dancing light across the soot-darkened interior of the dome. Once the reeds have established a stable base, you begin to feed the fire with the tamarisk branches. You place them carefully, building a structure that allows for airflow, ensuring the fire will grow steady and strong rather than being smothered by its own fuel. The temperature inside the oven begins to climb. You can feel it on your skin, a radiant heat that starts as a gentle warmth and slowly intensifies until it demands respect. You do not rush the fire. It is a living thing that needs to be fed with patience. As the tamarisk catches the roar, the fire deepens, a low, guttural sound that vibrates through the clay walls. Sparks drift upward, caught in the draft, swirling toward the roof openings like tiny wandering stars. You step back and allow the ovens to breathe. This is the stage where the heat begins to soak into the thick mud brick walls, a process that is crucial for the success of your baking. You need the thermal mass of the oven to be saturated so that even after the flames have been tempered, the heat remains steady and pervasive. You watch the smoke curl upward, escaping through the small vents in the roof, a signal to the rest of the village that the day's work is well underway. You stand by the oven entrance for a long moment, your hands resting on your hips. The heat is intoxicating, a physical presence that banishes the last remnants of the cool morning. You are a master of this environment, and you can tell by the sound of the flames and the color of the glow exactly how the oven is progressing. You have fed the fire exactly what it needs, and now you must wait for the clay to reach the perfect temperature. This is a time of quiet observation, a brief window where the fire does the work, and you can simply stand, feeling the heat sink into your muscles, preparing you for the long, demanding hours that lie ahead. The bakery is now fully awake, pulsating with a warmth that will soon transform the simple dough into the bread that feeds your people. The morning sun has climbed higher now, casting long, dusty beams of golden light through the roof vents of the bakery, illuminating the gentle clouds of flour that hang suspended in the air. You return to the central mixing vat, where the dough has been quietly resting and fermenting under its pale linen shroud. You lift the cloth, and a warm, sour fragrance washes over you, a rich, yeasty perfume that signals the wild starters have done their work. The dough has risen beautifully, swelling to fill the clay vessel, its surface dotted with tiny, fragile bubbles that whisper of the life active within the grain. You prepare your workspace, a long, thick table fashioned from heavy sycamore wood, its surface worn smooth and white from decades of flour and friction. You take a handful of fine, dry emmer flour from a nearby basket and scatter it across the wood with a sweeping, practiced motion of your wrist. The flour settles like a thin layer of winter frost on the dark timber. With your forearms dusted to prevent sticking, you reach deep into the vat, your fingers sinking into the warm, yielding mass. The physical effort of lifting the dough begins. You tilt the vat, allowing the heavy, sticky mixture to slide out onto the floured table with a soft, wet thud. It is massive and quiet, a sleeping giant of grain and water that now requires the strength of your shoulders to tame. You begin to knead. You push the heel of your hand deep into the center of the mass, rolling it forward, stretching the wet fibers of the gluten, and then folding it back over itself. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. Your breath falls into perfect sync with the movement. It is a laborious, deeply satisfying work that warms your muscles and clears your mind. Gradually, under the steady pressure of your hands, the texture of the dough begins to transform. The stickiness fades, replaced by a smooth, satin elasticity. It becomes responsive, springy, and alive beneath your palms. You can feel the tension building within the dough, a resistance that tells you it is ready to be divided and shaped. You reach for your flat bronze scraper, a simple tool with a wooden handle, and begin the process of division. Today, your work is divided by destiny. You must prepare two entirely different kinds of bread, reflecting the structured harmony of the world around you. To your left, you will shape the refined, sacred loaves destined for the altars of the local temple, offerings to please the gods and sustain the priests. To your right, you will prepare the dense, hearty, and practical ration loaves that will feed the hard-working stonecutters, farmers, and weavers of the village. You begin with the sacred dough, which has been mixed from the finest, double-sifted emmer flour. This flour is pale and soft, free from the coarse bran and accidental stone dust that characterizes the daily bread. You pull a small portion of this premium dough toward you. The touch is delicate, almost reverent. For the gods, the bread must not only taste pure, yet it must be beautiful, capturing the eye and the spirit. With slow, deliberate movements, you roll a piece of dough between your palms, elongating it into a smooth, even rope. You lay it upon a clean linen cloth and begin to curl it inward, creating a tight, elegant spiral. This shape represents the eternal cycle of the sun. a visual prayer for renewal and light. You work with artistic focus, your fingers shaping other pieces into stylized animals. Small, crouching gazelles with delicate curved horns, and fat, nesting waterfowl with tucked wings. These shapes are not mere decoration. They are symbols of the fertile valley's abundance, offering the essence of the wild marshlands to the creator gods. To create these intricate forms, you use small, carved wooden stamps and bone styluses. You gently press a stamp into the smooth surface of a shaped loaf, leaving behind the crisp, clean impression of a lotus blossom or the sacred cartouche of the temple. Each mark is made with a steady hand, ensuring the design remains sharp even as the dough rises further. An apprentice stands beside you, quietly dusting each completed ceremonial loaf with a microscopic layer of fine flour, before placing it onto a polished wooden tray lined with fresh green palm fronds. Once the sacred shapes are complete and resting under a damp cloth to prevent their skins from drying, you turn your attention to the mound of coarser dough. This is the bread of the living, the fuel of the empire. It contains the whole grain, rich in nutrients but heavy and dense. For this bread, you do not use hand shaping or delicate stamps. Instead, you rely on the efficiency of clay molds, the bija. These molds are heavy, conical pots made from coarse, straw-tempered clay. Your apprentices have already placed dozens of them near the mouth of the heating ovens, warming them so that they are hot to the touch. You take a heated mold, holding it with a thick piece of folded linen to protect your fingers from the scorch of the clay. You dip your hand into a small bowl of sesame oil, lightly coating the interior of the hot mold. The oil sizzles softly against the clay, releasing a rich, nutty aroma that mingles with the yeasty scent of the dough. Once the sacred shapes are complete and resting under a damp cloth to prevent their skins from drying, you turn your attention to the mound of coarser dough. This is the bread of the living, the fuel of the empire. It contains the whole grain, rich in nutrients but heavy and dense. For this bread, you do not use hand shaping or delicate stamps. Instead, you rely on the efficiency of clay molds, the bija. These molds are heavy, conical pots made from coarse, straw-tempered clay. Your apprentices have already placed dozens of them near the mouth of the heating ovens, warming them so that they are hot to the touch. You take a heated mold, holding it with a thick piece of folded linen to protect your fingers from the scorch of the clay. You dip your hand into a small bowl of sesame oil, lightly coating the interior of the hot mold. The oil sizzles softly against the clay, releasing a rich, nutty aroma that mingles with the yeasty scent of the dough.